Hello and welcome to this movie night review with me, Ed. Today we're talking about the film Fantastic Mr. Fox, written and directed by Wes Anderson, starring George Clooney, Bill Murray, and Meryl Streep. Now, I've been called many things in my life, one of which uh, overly critical. I've been called overly critical by a few people, not naming any names, maybe one of them being the host of another very successful YouTube channel, Off the Post. But I digress. I can sometimes, I appreciate, seem somewhat overly critical of a lot of things, especially films. But that's really only because I'm a complete loser and I spend all my time watching films. I really like films, basically, and I think films of any genre can be great, and I want films that aren't so great to be better most of the time. I don't just write off stuff unless it's complete unsalvageable garbage, which who knows, we might cover some of those types of films in the future. But anyway, um, it's easy for filmmakers to get complacent if the audience settles for mediocrity. It happened to an extent with films like Batman vs Superman, because the director knew that superhero films would sell. He felt like he didn't have to put as much effort in it, or at least that's what perceivably happened. Um, but anyway, how does this relate to Fantastic Mr. Fox? Well, Wes Anderson, as well as many other great directors, applies a certain mentality to their work. Wes Anderson doesn't think that he's above making a kids' film, even though he's a very well established director. He doesn't think that making a children's film is beneath him, and it's certainly that prospect certainly doesn't lower his standards, like perhaps the director of Batman vs Superman did. I can't remember his name now. So yes, you might say it's overly critical to criticize a kids' film, but I would use this example of Fantastic Mr. Fox to show why I criticize kids' films. It's because a lot of people write them off and say, well, there's no point criticizing a kids' film, kids will eat anything up. Which, firstly, isn't very true. There's plenty of things that kids won't like. They won't just like everything you put in front of them. I think any parent will tell you that. And secondly, just because you can get away with something doesn't mean you shouldn't strive to make it as good as you can be, as good as it can be, sorry. You know, Wes Anderson clearly went into making this or writing this film with a passion and inspiration. He classically said that he really liked the book by Roald Dahl, and he wanted to have his own spin on it, and that's really what came out of this. It's a very unique kids film. It's really nothing like you've ever seen before. And I'm not saying all kids films should be like this in terms of style, but it makes me kind of hopeful that this is the new standard in a sense that people aren't just going to accept, or kids especially aren't just going to kind of accept this bland kind of mediocrity, as I was saying, in their films, and it's really stands the test of time in a lot of ways, and it's hopefully sets the standard. I mean, this film came out in 2009, and it doesn't really seem to have set as much of a standard, but I digress. Now, why do I think this film is so great and so kind of its own kind? Well, a lot of the reasons come from just like, well, basically Wes Anderson being a kind of a genius. I don't want to say something as generic as like, oh, kids and adults can like it, but I will say it. So it's kind of that thing where you can enjoy it much the same if you're a kid and if you're an adult, because there's a lot of surface level stuff that's enjoyable, for both kids and adults. There's nothing wrong with a bit of style over substance even for adults. Just the pure like choreography is amazing. There's a lot of kind of long stretches of not kind of action scenes, but kind of scenes like gauntlets of sorts. It's somewhat hard to describe. There's a lot of scenes that kind of almost in a video game type fashion scroll to the right, and the characters just do some amazing athletic stuff to get round, all in beautiful stop motion animation, which is rarely seen nowadays. So with favourable in terms of CGI, Sony film. The most recent example I can think of is Kubo. Um, so any director or filmmaker that takes advantage of this medium, I definitely appreciate, just because I can understand how hard it is, how much more pressure you're putting on yourself, and that did kind of show in Kubo. But anyway, on the topic of Fantastic Mr. Fox, that kind of stop motion adds to that child-like aesthetic. You know, at the end of the day, this is a kid's storybook. You know, a storybook type adventure. So that kind of aesthetic of it being handmade and handcrafted, excuse me, really adds to that kind of atmosphere and that kind of tone that the film's trying to create. Because, as I said earlier, it doesn't feel like it's up its own arse in a sense. It's not trying to be really clever or really like avant-garde or something, but it's just unique, and it's often difficult to find a balance of that. You know, you want to appear somewhat niche, you want to create something that's new, but you don't want to seem kind of overly artsy and overly avant-garde. So this film really gets a good balance between that, because, and I think a lot of the reason why that is because it's a kids' film. You know, it's pretty hard to make a really avant-garde kids film. So you have to make your messages or the themes of your film kind of apparent and easy to understand, but then there's a lot of depth behind those. So it'd be kind of going off on a tangent if I talked about what this film was about, and also it would kind of ruin it for you. But there's a lot of strong themes that are prevalent, especially if you're a kid, that you should learn about. It's a lot about individuality and who you think you are and stuff. And the kids, I think, really do learn from that. Really should learn from that rather. So, and you know, that's kind of highlighted in the wolf scene at the end. Interestingly, apparently, Wes Anderson was told that they should cut it because it kind of didn't make a lot of sense. But it's kind of a strange one. It's like it only takes up half a minute or so of the whole movie, and it seems somewhat disconnected. Although obviously the main character's fear of wolves is referenced earlier on, but essentially it's an interesting take on it, because, like I was saying earlier, it's not completely avant-garde. You know, it's not like trying to tell a really abstract message. It's just it's a very clear message, especially if you're watching it as an older viewer. Which, as I was saying, it's you know, and even if you're a kid and you don't really understand it, it only takes up, as I said, half a minute of the whole movie. So it's not like it's going to ruin your enjoyment of it. But yeah, if you're an adult, you can definitely see what. Well, even then, you can't. There's been a lot of debate going on about what the scene actually means, and that kind of discussion creating is something if you watch my Whiplash review, you'll know I really appreciate in films, and especially surprising in a kids' film. It's a very kind of emotional, something that'll stick with you. Just thinking about what it could mean and what it could possibly represent is a lot of kind of. It's very interesting to think about. And you know, all of this you could still consider a moot point, because at the end of the day, it's a film about anthropomorphic animals designed for children. But that kind of thinking is the exact opposite kind of thinking of Wes Anderson and so many other people that are involved in this. You don't have to settle, even if it's something like a kids' film, you don't have to settle for mediocrity, and you can certainly expect a lot of great things from light relief entertainment. It's about going above and beyond your kind of preconceived notion of what you think something is, and that's really what it comes down to. You know, at the end of the day, Wes Anderson's a great director, and he's not going to take this kind of thing lightly, even if it is a kids' film. and that really shows in this. There's a lot of strong themes about family, individuality, but then also you've got it's just accessible like a kids' film should be. The characters are engaging and lively. The cinematography encapsulates you, so it's good for people with short attention spans like kids. So it really draws you in, and there's no reason I think why you can say that. I've heard of people call it kind of boring because it's designed too much for adults, but I really don't see that argument at all. I mean, at the end of the day, the themes, the story is completely juvenile, but the central ideas are something that you can look into a lot more when you're a bit older, and you kind of can relate to them a bit more. Then it's a story about a father trying to protect his family from the mistakes he made, and that's something you can appreciate a lot more when you're a bit older. So basically, don't expect kids' films to be crap. And I'll always use this example from now on, or use it as one of my examples when I'm talking about this, because it's so relevant, and it's really an example of a director and a writer going above and beyond what's required, and really showing people that kids aren't that dumb. I mean, some of them are quite dumb, but kids aren't that dumb, okay? And kids' films can be just as good, if not better, than most films. Batman vs Superman, give me the choice between that and Fantastic Mr. Fox, and I think I know what I would choose. So, thank you very much for listening.